basic income, right, is the idea of giving everybody cash without questions asked. So everybody receives the same thing and there are no conditions to receiving that cash. Now, this idea has actually historically been around for a really long time, as far as at least Thomas Paine, but it has seen a resurgence in recent years. And, I think we can track that back to partly a Swiss referendum, and then eventually the most momentous event for the US was the Andrew Yang campaign, where he defended a $1,000 a month benefit, universal basic income, the freedom benefit. And so I think he has successfully rebranded this universal basic income as an all-American kind of proposal that has this freedom component to it. And I will say that as an economist, that is very much conform to the way we're thinking about it, because cash allows for the most freedom for people to spend it however they see fit and however they think they can benefit the most from that spending. In contrast with a type of benefit, let's say like public housing, which, well, by definition, it's public housing. So if that's not your most pressing need, you can't use public housing to buy something else. So that's, I think a very momentous event for the US is the Andrew Yang campaign. That made a huge difference, and he has been so successful beyond expectation, coming from a small, relatively unknown group of young tech inclined supporters and becoming really well known because he's been able to make it to the debates. And I think that really changed the national conversation around universal basic income. So I'd say step one in the recent popularity of basic income, the most momentous one, is the Andrew Yang campaign. But then step two, right, in the popularity is the pandemic. What happened is, it was so severe, so sudden, so many people were all of a sudden put out of work by the closure of many businesses, as well as consumers consumers didn't want to go out and consume and expose themselves from a health perspective to this pandemic. And so many jobs have been cut. And so as a result, the government tried to act fast and they gave a stimulus check. The stimulus check is very much like a universal basic income. Everybody got the same amount. And while the top 10% of highest income Americans were excluded, essentially 90% of the US population got it. So of course this is temporary, but it gave people, after Andrew Yang talked about it, it gave people a concrete flavor of what it would be to get it in their own pocket, in their own household.
I've been following the HarrisX polls, since the first one. So, I was really excited to see the growth from 43 to 49 in just like 6 months during Yang's campaign. And so I've actually been looking forward to seeing the next one, comparing to those first two, to see just what's going on during the pandemic. It's unfortunate that it's under these conditions that we're seeing this growth in UBI. I don't think that would have grown as fast outside of these conditions. But at the same time, it's so important that I feel that support grows. And so I'm happy to see that people are actually recognizing the need more for this idea during this time.
Now, what I find really interesting in those polls is how the idea of a universal basic income has made inroads pretty much in all demographics and party affiliation. So for example, as far as demographics, we can see that some of the biggest gains are actually among the 35 to 49-year-olds who went from supporting it 53% in February 2019, and now by August 2020, it's 69%. So this is a more than 10 percentage point increase in support. Now, another thing that I found very interesting and surprising is the people over 65 who are least likely to support it on average but the progress in support is pretty phenomenal. They went from supporting it only 21% in February 2019 to 34%, so almost a third recently. And again, it's a more than 10 percentage point increase. Now, from a partisanship perspective, if you look at Democrats, they are more favorable to the idea. And, that is to be expected because it's a new government benefit. Although, of course, there's actually libertarian supporters of something like a universal basic income because it's the idea of freedom. Nevertheless, it is a kind of idea that seems somewhat more germane to Democrats.
So I've seen some other previous, say, polling during the coronavirus, and it's out of Stanford. And it was really interesting how they showed this big support too, just over the course of a month. And apparently, the source of this growth, they believe, is mainly along two different channels through two different groups. And it's that on the one hand, people are experiencing this loss of income and need for assistance for the first time really in their lives, and because of that they are looking at this differently, and then they're also experiencing like the safety net differently. So they actually for the first time had to apply for unemployment, and then for the first time they recognized that maybe you're having to call every day for like a week in order to get in, or maybe there's like giant lines, or maybe you are actually able to fill out your stuff and then you never hear back from them. And so, there's people out there that have applied and they've never gotten anything still, even though the boost is already over. So I think people are experiencing this, and that is making a big difference for them. And it's also not only the people who have, say, lost jobs, but also had seen reduced income as well. So there's a lot of those people. The Stanford polling showed that about 7 out of 10 people had either lost a job or seen reduced income. So those people, a lot of people are experiencing this. And the other part of it too is that so many people are worried about being in that group. And so even if you have your job and you haven't seen a drop in income, your stress levels are up. You are living in an insecure existence where you feel that at any moment your job could be gone, and then you have to go through all this stuff, and maybe you will fall right through this conditional safety net, and maybe you won't. It's a gamble. And so now looking at it from these lines too, you're thinking, well, wait a second, universal basic income makes a lot more sense because it's going to be there no matter what. And now that it's coming to me, then that's a big deal. And some psychological impacts from this too are that people are kind of feeling that they're in the same boat in a way that they weren't before. So you're looking at other people, and whereas prior to the pandemic hitting, if you were asked the question, do you think if someone gets a basic income that you will be better off? And that person would have said, I don't think so. It's going to help them, but it's not going to help me. And now they're flipping on that. They're thinking, wait a second, I know that if someone else gets this, then I am helped because, we're all in the same boat. We're all connected. Their income is my income. There's just more kind of cohesion happening at the same time as also we're seeing all this social disarray possibly, we're seeing people in the streets and stuff. But at the same time, there is this kind of a sense too that we're in this together more than before. And so, yeah, hopefully we'll just keep on seeing that steady growth with support in basic income. But yeah, it's a big deal that it's finally majority support in the HarrisX poll. I'm excited.
I am against the universal basic income because I don't think that people who are in middle class or above should be getting free money that ultimately comes from all of us, including taxpayers who are poor. So I make a good income. I have made a good income. There is no reason why I should be getting, $1,000 a month or $1,500 a month or $500 a month in free unencumbered money from the government. I don't need it. Certainly people like Bill Gates and Warren Buffett don't need it. Members of Congress don't need it. It is ridiculous to, in a world where the federal government is something like $25 trillion of debt that they've racked up over the history of the United States, to start saying that middle class, upper middle class, wealthy plutocrats get free money. That's insane. So I think on a basic moral level, that's bad. I think there are a lot of kind of pragmatic and utilitarian concerns as well. Most of the research of universal basic income plans suggests that there is, at some level, in an important way, there is a disincentive to work. If among a fair number of people, if you have $1,000 coming in every month, regardless of whether you get out the door or not, for some number of people, they're going to be like, okay, I'm good with that, and they're not going to be productive. I think that's problematic. And then the other thing is that for universal basic income to really work without completely breaking the bank of the United States, it needs to be done in a way where we get rid of all transfer programs for social welfare spending, whether it's Social Security or Medicare, student loans, home mortgage interest deductions, farm subsidies, you name it. All of that kind of stuff should disappear, and then it should be replaced with a single payment a month. There is virtually nobody who seriously thinks that under any kind of universal basic income plan, we're actually going to do that. What is likely to happen is that we'll say, here's an extra amount of money, free money a month to do whatever you want with, and we're going to continue housing vouchers. We're going to continue unemployment benefits or food stamps or Social Security, disability, things like that. So I don't think from a political economic viewpoint, from the viewpoint of political economy, we can expect this program to stay pure in the way that I think it needs to in order to work most effectively.
So the future of UBI is going to be very interesting. I think it very much depends, certainly in the US, on who wins the presidential election. But I think in general, it's clear that the idea is becoming more appealing. And so I think that there will be, no matter what happens, further developments and blueprints of how we might be getting there.